All right. How many different types of salivary glands are there? There are. That's right. And the major function that would occur for digestion when it comes to that of salivary glands would be the secretion of what? You would think, because it says it up there. That's probably what I would have went with too, but it's not mucus. Okay. When we look at today's lunch menu, when it comes to that of the subs, I don't know if it's ham or what goes on. We'll just say that it's ham. The amylase, will that work on the cheese, the ham, or the bun/bread, do you think? You are right. It is the bread. Why? Lots of starch in it. That's right. Because when we look at that of saliva, there's three components to that. As you had mentioned earlier, this is one. It's mucus, okay? So what does that mucus have to do with saliva? How does that help us in the digestive process? Getting from point A, which is the pharynx, down to the stomach. That's where it would occur. What do you suppose that mucus does? Yeah, it kind of acts like a oil or lubricant, so it slides down the old gullet a little easier. Okay, so that's one component is mucus. What's another component? Enzyme amylase is the second component. And what might the third one be? I bet it's water. Yeah, it's mainly made of water. Okay, so we get this information from here. Okay, and this just has what it does. I thought it had one that talked about the components of it. Okay, amylase, mucus, but yes, there's water in there as well. The amylase is the enzyme that starts to break down starches, and that's what it's getting at here. Glycogen and different types of starches. Did we get to the stomach? Okay, so that's where we begin. Okay, here we go. So even though just a very limited amount of absorption would take place here in that of the stomach. But it is where protein digestion begins. And it's within these next couple of days, we said, is really, really important to get this mechanism down. We'll talk about it a lot, okay? We don't expect you to learn and correlate and understand this on the very first day we go over it. But if you had to guess, why might only limited absorption take place in the stomach? Where does the majority of absorption take place, would you think? Certainly not the stomach. Something that has to have finger-like projections called lumen inside of it. We have talked about lumen. Where would that be? In the small intestine. Yes. Small bowel, small intestine. And then, again, you have those finger-like projections then that have capillaries that can absorb this. Okay. Two openings, as you can see. Now, whether heartburn is it's called that because it's called the cardiac portion or valve, or it's a muscle, so it's one that opens and closes like this. You call it sometimes called a sphincter then as well. So you have one on the top and the bottom. General, what I want to say, way to keep them separate is the top is closer to the heart, so then that's why that is the cardiac opening. One of the reasons that I would be led to believe that we say only limited absorption takes place in the stomach is because it's something that we had talked about, I believe, the first week or second week, and that is when it comes to some people, if they unfortunately try to consume, and I'm not saying it's intentional, but they may consume too much alcohol too quickly. The worst thing is to actually black out and pass out. And some people that actually does happen. That's unfortunate. But what the stomach can do is send a distress signal to the brain and say, we've got too much of something in here that we do not want. So it sends that signal from the brain down to the stomach, and it tells this guy to open up. And then when that happens, that distress signal causes an involuntary reaction. Okay, your epiglottis will slam shut. Your uvula also flaps up, so you don't get any of that expulsion into the nose, and then you expel that substance out of the stomach. So that's what we would be led to believe. I would be led to believe that that's why just limited absorption takes place. It's kind of like a fail-safe option, if you want to call it that. Okay. And then let's see where this puts us. Okay. I want to get through this one and then this one. Okay. So what I would think, if you can picture perhaps a strawberry on the outside, what do you see all around the exterior surface of a strawberry? Seeds. Little types of seeds, but we're going to call them pits instead. So picture that being the lining of the stomach on the inside. Remember, we said there's just a small bit of absorption that can take place. One is because it is an organ. So any type of organ is going to have an adequate blood supply, and the stomach is no exception for that. So this can also give us that chemical distress signal. If there's something there that the brain thinks is really not very useful for us, it can send that signal to the brain and then up it comes. Now, also, for some people who have problems with producing too much acid, it's these gastric pits then that can be blocked. So what we mean Okay, so when it comes to these two right here, is anyone speculating, I'm really not very good at keeping things separate? Okay, and it's one of those to where something similar, you can say, well, there is no I in team, right? Well, there isn't. Okay, but when it comes to which one of these types of cells secretes which substance, okay, is there an A in chief? Of course not, because I don't see one there. But since there is an A in parietal, just know that since this has an A, what is it secreting? It's probably the best way you can keep that separate. The parietal cells will always secrete the acid because it has an A in it. Chief cells then will secrete. It's an inactive enzyme, okay? But we will be talking about that tomorrow. It's when these two come in contact with one another, okay? So what that means, it's, what would be the best way of describing that? Sometimes when it comes to maybe different types of drain cleaners, they have two separate portions. And it's once those two come in contact with one another, actually does the cleansing and flushing function down in your trap. Okay, and it helps to just clean your pipes. Although maybe not all plumbers believe in that product, but maybe it's some sort of Drano, something to that effect. But it's when these two come in contact with one another, it's like a light switch gets turned on and it activates the enzyme that will break down proteins. It'll help you break down proteins. But it doesn't diminish, these are also important too. Okay? What do you think the function of mucus might be on the inside of your stomach? What does a buffer do? Kind of gives a protective function, okay? So, for instance, I don't know, she's really mad at you. I'm just making that up. Maybe she is. I don't know. We got our buffer right here, kind of keeping you two separate. So that buffer is just a protective function, okay? And it's important that it continually secretes that mucus, because if it didn't, the stomach might just eat a hole through itself. That's why it's important to have that mucus in there and continually secretes that. All right, I don't want to get too far ahead, so we will stop there for today. We'll catch up to you next time.